Welcome back to another IPS take here at Inside Pack Sports on YouTube. And today we are talking ACC football. We're looking at the ACC quarterback. We're going to take a look at some rankings of the position. And I've got Jake McSwain with me. And Jake, we're going to use a tweet here. I think you're going to post it. And won't you tell our viewers a little bit about the tweet and how we're going to view this?
Yeah, so this came across our feeds here, and I think it got some discussion going internally on what we think about it and how we agree. But I think it's a useful exercise, especially as it relates to NC State and where CJ Bailey falls amongst the ACC in general, to start having that conversation and start kind of ranking out some of these quarterbacks.
Garrett Armbrust from Fourth and Saturday with the tweet. Want to give him a shout out, follow. He kind of put together some ACC quarterback rankings. So we're going to take a look at these rankings and give you our thoughts, maybe tier them a little bit, maybe tell you where we agree with Garrett, give you our thoughts on maybe where we disagree a little bit. And Jake, let's jump right into it. Cade Klubnik, number one. I don't think that's much of a debate. I think a lot like the standings we did where we talked about Clemson and maybe everybody else. Well, you've got Klubnik coming back this year after a big-time breakout year in 2024. All of his weapons back, offensive line intact. The expectation is he's just going to have a monster year here. Going into the season, I agree, but I will caution and say sometimes it doesn't play out the way everybody expects it to play out with the quarterback position, right? I mean, there's been years where we thought going in there was a clear-cut number one, and somebody often comes out of nowhere and is better. And so while I think it's one of those deals when you do rankings, you have to kind of judge, okay, when am I going to be projecting and when am I going to be just relying on what we've seen from these guys? And if you're going on what you've seen, you can't go with anybody but Klubnik at this point at number one.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that Jennings from SMU is the only other guy that could possibly like preseason challenge for that.
Who was that?
Right? Jennings from SMU. I mean, took his team to the CFP last year. Like that to me is like puts him in that conversation and possibly number one. But with Cade's, his pedigree, what he's done at Clemson, the kind of bounce back resurgent season of last year, it makes sense as to why you would view him as a number one option coming out.
Yeah, I think it does. I think there's a teardrop here for me after one. And I believe you can lump in a lot of guys starting at number two. And I know others might disagree because of Carson Beck and him coming into Miami from Georgia. But I don't know. You're laughing there. So I don't know if you agree with me on it or not. But I'm personally not totally sold on Beck. And I'll tell you why, Jake. Just in years of doing this, when you see it doesn't always work out this way. But when you see quarterbacks go from a place where they've been so supported with talent around them, and he was labeled like we're looking here at Garrett's tweet here, and he says he was a very solid quarterback at Georgia. Well, very solid doesn't make me feel great about putting a guy two when he's coming off a major injury, right? He had an elbow injury that forced him to miss spring ball. And he's going to Miami now, totally new environment, totally new system, totally new team, new players, all those different things, different pressure spot, right? Like, and what I mean by different pressure spots, you think about it when you're quarterback at Georgia, what do you know you've got on that other side? You got Kirby Smart's defense. Yeah. And you can just manage a game and win a game that way. He's replacing Cam Ward, who was arguably, I don't think arguably, but he was the number one pick in the draft, the top quarterback in the country last year, who had to drag Miami to wins. And so think about what we're saying here. So now you're being put in a spot where you have to carry a team potentially versus manage a team. And I just don't know if he's ready for that to the level where I would put him number two. So, Jake, I would not go with Carson Beck number two. We can debate who would replace him later, but what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm right there with you. I think that when you're looking at Beck, it's to your point, not only do you not have the Georgia defense on the other side of the ball, but you also probably have a bit of a downgrade around the skill positions. Like he was throwing to Brock Bowers a couple years ago, and the offensive line is going to be Georgia's offensive line always pretty stout, and I just don't know, man. I feel like you come into the ACC, and granted, I mean, you can make the argument where it's like, well, okay, maybe those pieces take a step back, but he's also playing against ACC defenses versus SEC. So I could see both sides of the coin, but even on the eye test for me, I I just don't know about it. I don't think, it's almost interesting to compare it to like a Grayson McCall for NC State last year, where he's putting up huge numbers and the competition level was lower, but also the talent around him was a little bit different. So I'll be interested. Who would you have at number 2?
Well, that's why I say it's wide open. Like, I'm looking at all these names, and I think you could make a case for, honestly, 7, 8, 9 guys at number 2. Like, for me, the cutoff I would go to would be all the way down to probably Chandler Morris. I think Chandler Morris would be the lowest I would go, just kind of if we're going off of Garrett's rankings here. I could go all the way down to 9 if Chandler Morris, because you think about the numbers he put up in North Texas, going to Virginia, light schedule. We'll talk about him in a second. Not saying I'd put him at 2, but I wouldn't be surprised if any of these guys in that group ends up being the second best quarterback in the ACC. If I had to pick one, though, in terms of, and the way I would go with it would be not only production, but where I think that team could potentially finish in the ACC, I would actually go with Haynes King. I like Georgia Tech's schedule this year. I like Georgia Tech's schedule a lot. I think he's now just locked completely in as the guy there. Perfect system for his skill set. I think they're in a position to finish second or third in the league. And if he puts up the type of numbers that he's capable of in that system with that schedule, I think he could be the guy at number 2 for me. So I would probably go Haynes King, but I know that's maybe a little higher than most, but what do you think?
No, I'm with you. I think Haynes King has the potential to solidify like that number 2 spot, or could be could be the best in the ACC next year. The schedule aligns for him. The other guy, like I mentioned him earlier, but Jennings out of SMU, I think that it's interesting for me because it's a situation where, do you feel like he's automatically going to continue the success that he had last year? I know that he's a dual threat guy, but also he didn't start last season as a starter, so it's that, teams early didn't have a ton of tape on him. The more tape he got, like, you wonder, is that a situation where maybe he is in for a little bit of regression? You know what I mean? It's tough to say. And you could say the same thing about CJ Bailey for NC State.
Well, yeah, I do think there are concerns there with King. And for me, for one, the first big one is he shell-shocked coming out of the performance he had in the college football playoff? He was not good in that college football playoff against, I believe it was Penn State. Struggled. And I thought his early miscues played a role in SMU not really having a chance to win that game. Where is he at from a confidence standpoint? That may seem small to some people, but now he's going all in as the guy this year. Last year, like you said, he was paired up with Preston Stone. Stone entered the year as the starter. Jennings eventually beat him out. But then you also look at that schedule, and it's a little. I think it's tougher this year for them. Last year you had that one game on there that really you had to look out for, which was Florida State. And lo and behold, Florida State ended up the worst team in the ACC, right? And so I think that played a role in SMU's success. Whereas this year you look at that schedule, and what do you have? You're at Clemson. You have Miami at home. You have Louisville on the schedule. Those are not easy matchups, right? Those are not easy conference matchups for a team like SMU. And so I wonder if SMU is going to sneak up on teams this year, like I think they maybe did last year. They did not get any respect last year, right? Coming out of their conference, I think a lot of people just assumed, hey, they wouldn't be ready for the ACC. They did a hell of a job in the transfer portal last year, and I think they were ready to take advantage of the schedule given to them. I don't think they're going to sneak up on teams. I think Jennings' skill set's going to allow him to have a big year because he is that dual threat, right? He's going to carry that offense. And so I'm not telling you I'm expecting him to finish 8th, right? But I do think he could be in that 2, 3, 4, 5 range. Another guy I want to talk about that I would have up here, and he's number 5 in Garrett's rankings, Miller Moss. He is going to a system in Louisville where Tyler Shuck was outstanding last year. I think it was Plummer 2 years ago led them to an ACC title appearance. Has weapons, has a great running game with Brown. And I would argue he's the most talented quarterback that Jeff Brahms had at Louisville. Like, I think he's more talented personally than Tyler Shuck. Shuck might have better, athleticism, but I think Moss's ability to just distribute the football as a passer, I thought he was really good at Southern Cal. And I think in that system with that running game, I think he has a chance to have a big time year.
Yeah, it's almost like NC State with basketball, like the few years before this past year where, they bring in a guard and you just feel like, oh, that guard's going to, probably average 18 to 20 points a game just because they seem to do that every year, right? So I view Louisville's quarterback in the same vein now, where it's like Louisville's going to, find a guy, they're going to bring him in, and he's going to exceed what your expectations were of him. Or like he's going to be better than even you think he might be just because that offense is going to produce some numbers.
So we talked about
Mensah's the other one though, and we're talking transfer quarterbacks. I mean, like a guy that a lot of people viewed as one of the top quarterbacks coming out of the transfer portal last year ends up at Duke, and I mean, kind of a wild card. I feel like that could have a wider variance than a lot of these things that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, it's funny. 6, 7, and 8 are 3 guys who I believe were all freshmen last year. I think Darian Mensah was a redshirt freshman at Tulane. Eli Holstein was a redshirt freshman at Pittsburgh. And then you had C.J. Bailey, a true freshman at NC State. And I think those 3 guys can like you said, I think the word wild card you mentioned is ideal for all 3 of them because they can go in a variety of directions. Mensah, like you said, a lot of people viewed him as the number 1 quarterback in the transfer portal. And Duke said, you know what? We're not even going to make this a recruitment. We're going to go out here and give him a number that's going to end this thing before he gets started. And Duke chose to do it that way, and they got it done with Mensah. Now, I think my question with Mensah versus Holstein and especially Bailey, it's the weapons, right? It's does he have the same amount of weapons they have, and is he going to be able to elevate that Duke offense? Because the funny thing with Mensah that I thought was interesting was he didn't really have the numbers you would expect for a guy to have the reputation he had in the portal. You look at his numbers here in this tweet, 2,700 yards, 22 passing touchdowns. I know he had a low number of interceptions, but this wasn't a guy who was out there with 40 total touchdowns, right? And just kind of just a video game style. And so Duke's going to have to pair a defense with him, I think, to kind of have him up in this range, because I actually think for me, Mensah might be a little high. Like, I don't know if the numbers are going to be there to be in this group. Whereas you take a guy like C.J. Bailey, for instance, where, I mean, C.J. Bailey's numbers are similar to Mensah's last year, being thrown in and out of the lineup, as a true freshman. And you look at the weapons he has around him, right? I mean, Hollywood Smothers at running back, all ACC tight end and Justin Jolie, a lot of talent at the wide receiver position. I'm not saying it. Garrett's saying it. Bailey may have the highest upside for his age of anyone on this list. And I agree with that. Like, I think he's a guy who he could potentially be in the top 4 when we're here at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think CJ has as good a case as anybody. I mean, you look at like the exact situation you laid out of where he was coming into last season, being thrust into action, exceeding expectations in a lot of ways, especially when even though his game count looks a little higher, how many of those were coming in the second half, like after an injury? Like, certainly not ideal. And, on Mensah, I'm looking up at stats right now. It seems like, to your point, those don't line up with what you would think of when you think of like, oh, this guy's a must get out of the transfer portal, especially coming from the school that he did, coming from Tulane. Like, you would think, okay, coming from that level, you would expect prolific numbers, not just like, those are pretty solid.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Holstein. We didn't spend any time really talking on him. It was interesting looking at his game log, like in comparison to Bailey, for instance. When you look at his game log, he came out in the first 5 games of the year, all the way up to that game against North Carolina. He looked like a star. I'm looking at his game log. He started the season for Pittsburgh. In the first 5 games of the year, he had 15 passing touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He threw 3 touchdowns in every game to start the first 5 games of the year.
He started out on fire.
He was
electric.
Against North Carolina, he had 381 passing yards. He had 2 more rushing touchdowns against Youngstown State. So he had 18 touchdowns and 3 interceptions to start the year when you factor in the rushing numbers. But then was it a product of better defenses, teams maybe having a feel for him? Because after that start, it wasn't pretty. The very next week against California, they won the game 17-15, but he threw for 133 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He comes back against Syracuse. Again, another game he didn't have to do much in because they won that game. but just 108 passing yards. At SMU, 248 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interceptions. The rest of the year after those first 5 games, he was injured the final 3 out of 3 games. He missed 3 out of the last 4 games of the season with an injury, but he had 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions after the first 5 games of the year. So I don't know. I don't know if that was due to injury. I don't know if teams kind of found a way to defend him and slow him down. Was it maybe a product of the schedule getting tougher? But for me, when I look at these top 9, 10 quarterbacks, I would have Holstein at the bottom, factoring in even Morris and Jones and maybe even Lopez, because I don't like a guy ending the year that way, Jake. And we were mentioning CJ Bailey earlier. I mean, when you take a look at how, for instance, he ended the year, and I wanted to pull up his numbers here. I mean, I think he was kind of more on fire, right? I mean, Bailey, his last couple of games of the year, he went to North Carolina and had 242 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, and played East Carolina in the bowl game, 230, 3 touchdowns and a score. We know he was really good at Georgia Tech on the ground, had that game against Stanford. So, yeah, I would probably have Holstein of any of these guys much higher just because of the unknown.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense to me. I'll say this as anecdotal evidence. I don't know if you've played the college football video game that came out yet, James.
Okay.
But every year, once you get past the first season or so, Eli Holstein is on the Heisman watch. No matter what, I don't know who he paid at EA to get the kind of the love he got from that game, but he's balling. Now, I'll tell you, kind of shifting subjects here a little bit. One guy who I think is too low is probably Castellanos for Florida State. Like, I mean, okay. You talk about going into a different situation. Like he had some really bright moments at Boston College, and he seems to have all the confidence in the world in his new situation. And I just don't know that having him 12th, behind a guy like Chandler Morris for someone that's been successful in the league makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's tough. I am actually a big Chandler Morris guy this year, so this might be our first disagreement here. My worry with Castellanos is a lot like we saw last year with DJU. Going to Florida State, it's a different element from a pressure standpoint, right? Like, I mean, you go to last year with DJU had a bounce back year at Oregon State, right? Playing up at Oregon State where not a lot of people cared. No, not a big spotlight. He just could go up there and play. Not a lot of media criticism, any of that stuff. And he put together a strong year. I think he led them to 10 wins, and it put him back into discussion after kind of flaming out at Clemson, which led to that opportunity for him at Florida State. I kid you not, if you go back to last year, I want to say 2 games into the season, Jake, people wanted to replace DJU because it wasn't working out. And when you look at Castellanos and the way his career ended at Boston College, it wasn't great. And I think going to Florida State, it's just a different pressure point. Now, I think skill set wise, if they can build around his running ability and take advantage of that and throw the football, you're right, it could work. And I'm not saying it won't work. I think Castellanos is a good quarterback. I just think when I look at Chandler Morris, last year at North Texas, he was unbelievable. Almost 4,000 passing yards, 31 touchdowns. I mean, he had, I think I saw 5 300-yard games, 3 400-yard passing games. And I said it earlier, he is going to Virginia, who I think has maybe the easiest schedule in the ACC. And when you look at who they're playing this year, I think he is going to be in a position to, and it's going to be a defense that's probably going to be in some shootouts, where when you start talking about their ACC schedule, I'm going to pull this up and tell it and give it to you. So they do play NC State, but it's on the road and it's a non-conference game. But their ACC schedule, they have Stanford and Florida State to start the year at home. Then they're at Louisville. And then they have North Carolina, California, Wake Forest, Duke, and Virginia Tech. So they avoid Clemson, SMU, Miami, and Georgia Tech.
That's a light schedule, man.
Yeah. I mean, and I think when you talk about his skill set, I know they've got weapons there. And you go back to last year when we were watching Virginia kind of from afar. I was always kind of throwing in some plugs for my guy, Mr. Anthony Calandria, and some of the big games he had statistically. So the system's going to be there for Chandler Morris to have, I think, a big time year. I really think he's going to have a chance to put up numbers. And I would kind of equate, to me, the comp I would have for him is, and not to say he's going to be this big time, but think about what Kyle McCord did last year, right? Statistically, he just had monster week after monster week. And Louisville, I think, ended up winning 9 regular season games. I want to say he went 5-3 in ACC play. I'm not going to say Virginia's going to win 9 games, but I do think Virginia is going to end up being in that 7-8 win range just because I think Morris is going to put up some huge numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that happening, and it makes sense to me. I was looking at this list, James, and I can't think of a guy whose stock has fallen more over 1 year than Kyron Drones. Like, I mean, we're talking, if we rewind the clock 365 days, this is a guy most people had like 2 or 3 on this in these same kind of quarterback power. I did a video for my channel last year. I think I had him like 3rd. And now like you're talking about in a, honestly, not all that great ACC quarterback class. Like you have him 10th. Like, I mean, and it makes sense to me. Like he was so super disappointing last year, but you got to think like the talent at least is there to maybe be better than this.
Yeah, my question with Drones is, one, what's around him, right? Like some of these guys we're talking about, we mentioned Holstein, and he's got a guy like Desmond Reed, right? You look at, and we already talked about Bailey, what he had. I know Virginia's put some weapons around Chandler Morris. What's around Drones? And then last year, frankly, he was banged up. He was banged up a lot of the season because of the style of play. I mean, he's a big physical guy that they want to run the football with. And then you build a passing game around him. And so, I don't know, man. It's hard for me to put a guy much higher who had 1,500 passing yards and 10 touchdowns in 9 games. Yeah. Right? Like those, yes. I like the skill set. I like, the way they want to use him, but it just hasn't played out statistically. I mean, you go back 2 years ago, he had 17 touchdowns. And that's where we talk about, like you said, and when we mentioned it kind of earlier with Cade Klubnik, it doesn't always work out like you think just on projecting, right? Like, I mean, 2 years ago in 2023, had 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions at Virginia Tech, and you thought, man, they've got a future star here going back into 24. But he got banged up, and it never really worked out. And you're right. I mean, I think he's got the upside to potentially move up, but I just can't see putting him above any of these guys on this list. Even Holstein, I probably sounded like I didn't think Holstein could play. I didn't mean it that way, right? I know he can play, but I just don't know if I could put Drones above him just on what we saw last year.
No, I get it. I get it. Now, the last guy I think I wanted to talk about, Gio Lopez. I'm like completely. I don't really have a firm opinion. So I think where he's at sounds about right. And he seems like he's going to be in the back half at best of that first kind of, or that second tier of quarterbacks that we talked about. But I was curious what your thoughts and where you thought, he fit in the rankings.
Yeah, this is an interesting one to me because I think it was one of the deals where, Carolina went in the portal and said, we're going to get this guy because I think he went in randomly. And then like a couple of days later, he picked North Carolina. So I'm sure they kind of evaluated, worked it out behind the scenes. You could probably lump him in with the group of freshmen we talked about earlier of Mensah, Holstein, Bailey. I mean, he had a good year last year, man. 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, threw for 2,600 yards, completed 66% of his passes. He also ran the ball well. I mean, he had 463 rushing yards, 7 more touchdowns on the ground. So this is a guy who accounted for, 25 touchdowns, 5 interceptions as a redshirt freshman at South Alabama. So, yeah, I mean, again, the wild card word, right? How's it going to work out at North? Now, I will say at North Carolina, I do think they're still allegedly having a quarterback competition, right? You get back Max Johnson off injury. You still have Bryce Baker, the freshman, coming in. And the reason I want to bring that up, Jake, is just because I'm not saying that Lopez isn't projected to be the starter. I think a lot of people who cover that program expect him to. But when you have other options like that, what's the leash look like for him? Right? If he comes out early and it's not great, well, I don't think North Carolina in year one under Bill Belichick has to stay with him. Right?
No,
Like if you
they're
come
not
out
tied
early
to
and
him.
you're not tied to him and you've got other options. This isn't a deal where you're talking about a guy like Chandler Morris, for instance, who I don't know what's behind him. I can't name their backup. I'm not saying they don't have a good backup, but whereas I know with Gio Lopez, like they like Bryce Baker, the true freshman. Max Johnson, I think, was the guy last year pre-injury, got injured in the first game of the year. And so I think statistically, Lopez, he's probably a lot like Bailey in a sense. He's got some real upside because he was good last year and he's going to a place in North Carolina where I think with the schedule they have is kind of similar to Virginia's. It's not strong. He could probably put up some big numbers. I think you just want to see it because that is a step up coming from South Alabama to North Carolina. And it's the same thing with Mensah, right? Like we didn't mention that for him, but going from Tulane to Duke, it is a step up in opponent. You've got better weapons around you, but how will it translate? But I'm with you. I like what I've seen from Lopez. I watched some tape of him when he picked North Carolina because I know a lot of people that I respect say he was really good in terms of watching him week in, week out at South Alabama. So, yeah, I think he's one to watch.
I think a good way to kind of put a bow on all this, and I'm curious how you'll answer this. Now, I'll be arbitrary here. If you were to have to put money on one of these guys, let's say that is lower than 5 on this list to have like a ACC Player of the Year type season, what are a couple guys you would throw some money on?
Man, I mean, well, you 5, I would go.
Chandler Morris excluded. We know you're going to say Chandler Morris.
No, I wouldn't say Chandler Morris. Actually, no, I was going to say I think the guy I would put money on would be 5, Miller Moss. Like I think Louisville's situation and the fact that like I really respect what Jeff Brom does from an offensive standpoint, and they're consistently in the mix. I mean, I think he's good. I think Miller Moss can play, and I didn't think Plummer. I think I'm getting it right. It was Plummer 2 years ago, right? The quarterbacks are running together. Right. I didn't really think he could play. No disrespect, I'm not trying to disrespect him. Clearly, Jack Plummer can play football, but to lead them to the ACC title game, I didn't see that coming. And I think Miller Moss is a step up in player from him, and also I think he's better than Shuck. I really do. And so you put that with the weapons they have there, the system, the running game. I really think he could be a guy that could challenge Klubnik. And then the other, this is last I checked, Jake, this is an NC State, Inside Pack Sports. We do cover NC State athletics, so I'm sure I'll be called a homer for this one, but it's really CJ Bailey, right? I mean, when you look at any, and you say below 5, when you go Darian Mensah on, I don't know if there's a combo of wide receiver, tight end, running back that would match NC State, right? I mean, just going into the year, when you look at it, I want to say, I could be wrong, and maybe there is a team below them, but I know NC State had, with Athlon and Phil Steele, you had a wide receiver, a tight end, and a running back all be named preseason All-ACC. And I'm not sure if below 5, there's another group that checked all those boxes in terms of a wide receiver, a tight end, and a running back making All-ACC. NC State had that with Hollywood Smothers, Justin Jolie, and Noah Rogers. And so you add that into Bailey and what he showed you last year in terms of his upside as a runner as well as a passer. I don't know, man. And the other thing I want to add to that, Jake, is there's an expectation the defense is going to slip without Tony Gibson. So you're going to have potentially more shootouts. You're going to have potentially more opportunities week in, week out to put up numbers offensively to where I could see Bailey having just a statistical breakout type year.
Oh, I mean, if you didn't say it, I was going to. I think CJ Bailey is the perfect match of opportunity with skill around him to come out and and really do something special. Now, could the wheels fall off? That's also in the realm of possibility here. Like, he could come out and NC State as a whole just completely underperforms. But hell, that's the same thing you could say about every guy below 6 or below 5 on this list.
You can say about some guys in the top 5.
Yeah. I mean, certainly could. I mean, I think there are very few sure things when it comes to this. And CJ Bailey's just in a spot where, to your point, like the talent that surrounds him in that huddle is good. And you even have like throw in the pieces on the offensive line that we feel pretty good about at this point. And I think even with the defense, like, State's going to, I think, and I'm forever the optimist, and I know we've said this 5 years in a row, but this is the year that the offense gets the training wheels off and they start to let it rip a little bit. And if that happens, then you have just all of the pieces in place. And to your point, I just don't think there's really anybody else on this list that has that.
I'm with you. Let me ask you this before we get going. We stopped at at Castellanos in terms of guys we covered. Below 12, is there anybody that you think could be, I don't want to say interesting because that might sound disrespectful to any of these quarterbacks, right? But there's going to be a guy or two below that who I think has a year better than expected. Is there anyone you would have your eye on? I'll let you go one, and then I'll throw a name out there as well.
Yeah, I'll say the only one that I've heard like positive things about would be Steve Angeli at Syracuse. Yeah. Like that's the one that kind of sticks out to me. And coming off what they did with Kyle McCord last year, it's like, well, maybe they have another one up their sleeve, but I don't know. Tough to say.
Yeah, Angeli is certainly up there. I think for me, the thing that and for those who don't know, Steve Angeli transferred in from Notre Dame, was in the mix at Notre Dame, played I think in the playoffs for them. Really talented quarterback, and you're kind of there. It's kind of being viewed as a plug and play into the system at Syracuse. Look, Syracuse lost a lot of talent around that quarterback position. Not only did they lose McCord, Rondé Gaston moved on. The running back moved on. You lost a slot receiver in the spring. And so it's not just McCord you've got to replace. And then anytime I can bring up Syracuse's schedule, Jake, allow me 15 to 30 seconds to do so. I want to kind of read this out to you real quick. And simply, I'll just leave it at the road games. There are 4 ACC road games this year. At Clemson, at SMU, at Georgia Tech, at Miami. Let me say that again for everyone. This is their 4 ACC road games. This is before you even factor in who they have to play at home. At Clemson, at SMU, at Georgia Tech, at Miami. They also have a non-conference game at Notre Dame, and they open the year in Atlanta against Tennessee. We'll leave those 2 off just for the sake of discussion. But I don't recall a road slate, ever seeing a slate like that in the ACC. I mean, I just told folks, we know what the preseason top 5 in the ACC looks like. Right? It's those 4 teams in Louisville. Well, they have 4 of those 5 on the road. So brutal. I think the over-under for Syracuse was 5, maybe 5.5. I don't know how you take over on that one. I mean, that was just the road games. And I mentioned the 2, Notre Dame and Tennessee. That's 6 games right there.
So you either got to steal one or be perfect almost the rest of the way. Just to hit the over. God, it's nuts.
Yeah, and so I'm with you. I like Angeli. Let me think. If there, another name on the list to throw out there, I'm going to throw out a wild card. Like, I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm sure I'll mess the name up. Kioe Sagapalotelli from California. My bad. I'm terrible with names, man. I'll just go with Jaron. All right, Jaron. I know he was a highly regarded recruit, 5-star recruit, went to California, picked California over Oregon. I know he's a guy who's supposed to be extremely talented. And at Cal, they've added some weapons out of the transfer portal. They added Kendrick Raphael from NC State, for instance. If he wins that job, he has a talent to have I think a good year. They also have Devin Brown coming in from Ohio State. So wanted to mention that. But yeah, I think we ran through all these names here, Jake. And it looks like to me, man, just to kind of wrap it, this is a strong year at the quarterback position in the ACC. When you start talking about having guys like Kyron Drones, Gio Lopez, Thomas Castellanos, 10, 11, 12 in the league, that tells you this is a strong year.
Oh, absolutely. And I said on the face, I think it's a class of quarterbacks in the ACC that maybe lacks outside of a Klubnik, like that high end, like we've seen in the past, like a Cam Ward, or even like throughout the years when you just had some really elite guys, like future NFL guys. But to your point, it's also deep. Like, there's a lot of guys who have been successful on the ACC level, and now those guys are in the back half of quarterbacks in the ACC. Like, by a lot of people's projections, that's a solid. Like, that shows kind of good depth in the conference at that position.
We were talking ACC quarterback today on the YouTube channel here, Inside Pack Sports. As always, make sure you check out www.insidepacksports.com for your latest coverage of NC State athletics football camps going on right now. So we've got plenty of coverage on the website, some basketball content. We're continuing to churn out Elite Plus content. For those who don't know, that's our NIL platform that we have at Inside Pack Sports, where we do some NIL content with NC State student athletes. So make sure you check that out. And if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe here at Inside Pack Sports on YouTube, and talk to you again soon.